Hi there, and thank you for tuning into the Social Circus, where every week we dive into a variety of topics covering social media, mindset, and how to run your business. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Social Circus. I'm your host, Sarah Thompson, and today I'm excited to be joined by another Sarah, Sarah Potter. Hey, Sarah.
Hello, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, Sarah is the owner of a very cool business called La Dolce Vita, and she describes herself as a sweet life activator. And I have to say, when I was reading your bio, Sarah, and I saw that, I was like, I need a cool title like that.
Yeah, La Dolce Vita is the sweet life in Italian. So it's all about like whatever brings sweetness to you. And it's different for everybody, right? And I just think it's a really nice way to encapsulate what I love and what I love to activate in people.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it. So, Sarah, for all of our listeners, tell us a little bit about you and your business journey and a little bit about what you offer as a business.
So I am a recovering marketer, is what I say. So I worked in corporate marketing for a really long time and I loved what I did, but I didn't really feel like it didn't fill me up. And I tried doing it in lots of different types of businesses and I would enjoy it and I would achieve what I wanted to achieve, but there was always something missing. Like there was definitely a service element and giving back that I wasn't getting from being in those roles. And so I would come up against lots of different challenging characters and stuff. And as part of that, I had some coaching. And it just completely opened up a new world for me in terms of what was possible. And my first conversation with my coach, I sat down, he said, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, I'd quite like to work for half of the year, do some consulting, do some writing, be creative. And he was like, why are you not doing that? I'm like, that's a very good question. And he just held the mirror up. And in that one conversation just opened up, well, you can do that. You have the skills to live more creatively, more flexibly, to go and live in a different country instead of just flying in every now and then as part of a global corporate team. And just it just opened a door, which opened a whole new world for me in terms of what was possible in having a more creative and sweeter life as I define it. So yeah, I went and moved to Australia, set up my own consultancy. I traveled, I volunteered for nearly a year in West Africa, and yeah, did my coaching training, did my hypnotherapy training, and just as I go along, I just pick up all these different tools that I use and then help my clients to unlock their next level of their sweet life too.
Oh, fantastic. And I have to say, I know that my listeners all know that I'm also a recovering full-time marketer. And now I love being in this digital space. But I promise we won't talk about that, as tempting as it will be to swap war stories. Because what I really like, and I love that you're able to pinpoint that moment of transformation for yourself. And I do want to talk a little bit about, because a lot of my audience are going to be ladies who are entrepreneurs or females. And I think actually I'm going to say, I know that we suffer in a way that I don't see as evident in a lot of my male clients that I coach. And this is really around our ability to be visible and to be confident and to show up. So I would love for us to have a little chat about that, because I know that that's something that you're also very passionate about.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think it's particularly, I know from personal experience and from working with my clients, that when we come from the structure of a business or a corporation, whatever it is, there's frameworks, there's rules, there's things that we exist within and hide behind sometimes. You know, it's easy to tell a story when it's in the voice of a brand, or, you know, there's a guardrail, but when it's just us showing up, it feels really vulnerable. And actually, I don't like that word, just us, because actually women in our divine essence are incredibly powerful, and finding that moving out of that space into our own space, I just don't think is talked about enough in terms of the mindset that's needed in order to support that.
No, it's funny. When you just said then guardrail, I have to be honest, I've never thought about it like that. And I definitely struggled with that when I left corporate and started my own business, because suddenly I wasn't who somebody said I should be. I could be whoever I wanted to be. And that actually was completely daunting. And at the time, you know, when you start a business because you're good at whatever the skills you are that you've got, and you're like, oh, I'm going to start a business because I'm great at marketing, so I'm going to just sell my services in marketing. And nobody speaks about the fact that running your own business is the biggest journey into self-discovery that you could possibly take.
It's huge. You're just giving me chills just saying that. It's massive, because it's and I remember saying to my kids, it's a blessing and a curse. Like, I could do absolutely anything, and then it's like, oh my God, anything. Like, I used to have so many rules about what I could say when and how I would say it and what language I would use. And this is what my clients come with as well. So I work with a lot of creative entrepreneurs that they might have a brilliant idea and they're just struggling to share it, or they they had a business and then it's not going as well as they wanted, and then they're worried about getting to the next. They're worried about being seen, they're worried about being judged by family, because there's all these stories that we tell ourselves about what everyone else is going to think about what we're doing. And it's huge, because it like you say, it's the biggest personal development project that you could possibly go on. It's so vulnerable, everything is on you. So being able to tune in every day and be like, okay, let's just get into the foundations of what do I need to do to move to the next tiny thing. I'm all about tiny nudges. You can have the big shiny sexy goals and they are really, really necessary, but actually we need to then boil back down to what's the next tiny nudge that's going to get you to that day, that week, that month, because otherwise it just becomes too overwhelming.
Well, I like tiny nudges.
Yeah, it's just so much easier, and you get quite a lot of traction quite quickly. So I'd have like creators. I had clients that are like jewelry makers or artists, and they're like, oh, I've done all this stuff but I can't possibly share it. And I'm like, how's anybody, you're not gonna have a business if you don't share it. Like, it's lovely sharing it with, and would encourage them to go on tiny steps, like share it with me, this is a safe space, share it with me. And then what would be the next step, what would be the next step, what would be the and just take it in tiny, because they would come to me and say, oh no, not until I feel confident. Oh, what does that look like?
And we're never confident. Honestly, I've been in marketing for over 25 years and own my own business for over 10, and I still feel like I'm faking it.
Yeah. And I think the multi-million-dollar, they all say like, oh yeah, you're and it's a beauty and a curse, isn't it? Because you can create whatever you want and there's no pathway, but then you kind of want a pathway.
I know. I'm still stuck on your tiny nudges. I think they're brilliant. So let's talk a little bit about some of the big issues that we face often as female entrepreneurs is our visibility, and how do we show up in our business. And I often find that a lot of the women that I speak and coach with, their biggest fear is someone seeing them and judging them.
It's such a huge one, and it's like that's what we want at the end of the day, isn't it, as business owners, to be seen. It kind of is. When you boil it down, you're like, oh my God, what's the worst that can happen? Like, somebody will see me, and that's what you want. And so, like, when I very first started my business Instagram account, I didn't tell anyone about it.
So brilliant.
I don't want anyone to see. You're like, I'm just going to secretly do it, and then the people that want to do it will find it. But
I love that. That's like a next level, Heidi.
Well, the thing is, I was like, my friends and family are not my clients at the end of the day, so they don't need to know about it. But I think there's a massive we seem to think that we need to talk to everybody. We don't need to talk to everybody. And I think there's people that show up very consistently. They have their own guardrails. They've created their own guardrails. They've created what's safe for them in terms of what they will and won't share. And I think that really helps build confidence, because we all have wobble moments. There's not an entrepreneur on this planet that doesn't have a wobble or a bad day or why am I doing this? It's a roller coaster.
Absolutely.
And you either kind of exhilarated by it or terrified by it, but it has its moments. And I think the, being really conscious about how we show up and when we show up, and whether we share, like I always say to people, you don't share from the wound, you share from the scar, because we have to I think a lot of people are worried about, I don't want to be sharing too much of my personal life, for example. Like, you don't have to. You can just talk about your cat. Like that can be the only personal element that you share in your business story. You don't have to talk about your kids or your partner or anything like that. And I think that helps build confidence, because I think there's this perception, and there's some people are comfortable sharing absolutely everything, and that's also fine. But I think the getting to a point of actually individually, what is it that you're comfortable with as a business owner, that really helps create a foundation. Or it might just be a place to start from, like, actually, I'm just going to talk about, so I used to talk about travel a lot, because I used to travel a lot.
Don't.
But that was a huge part of my life, and so that's something easy for me to talk about. That's not particularly personal, but it's a relevant part of my life to create a business story, and I was confident and I knew about it. And I think that's a great foundation, is like, what do you really love, what can you really easily talk about, and then build on it. And again, it's like a tiny nudge of, I feel comfortable in that space, because there's a fine line between, we all know that growth happens, and a growth in confidence happens when you're feeling out of your comfort zone, but there's kind of playing on the edges and throwing yourself off the precipice. Like, I don't advocate throwing yourself off. Like, play around the edges and just get it a little bit bigger every time. Before you know it, you're miles away from where you started, but without angst.
I love that analogy. I guess because I'm an Aussie, I often use the analogy, and I talk about, because we always say, you're diving in at the deep end. And I always say to people, let's dip our toe in. And I said, and then we're going to jump in with our floaties on. I don't know if that's an Australian term, floaties.
I like that.
Yeah, the little. And so I often use that analogy as to how far I want people to move and how scared I want them to feel. I'm like, always start with dipping your toe in. And I like that, because there's so much to be said. And Sarah and I were chatting before we started recording, and I said we must start recording, I was going to talk all night. But we were discussing the fact that we both have encountered so many of our clients that don't take action because they feel like it's imperfect action. And
that's the only way to start, right?
And I was making a joke, because on my YouTube channel, I've got videos from years ago, and my office isn't nicely set up. I don't have any lighting. I've literally got one little dingy light above me. And you know what? People still loved it. They still listen to your content. And Sarah and I were sort of discussing, if you never start making progress, you don't actually get any better. And not that we ever want to be perfect. We don't sort of head down that path though, do we?
No. But you've got to start somewhere. Like, even the most prolifically successful people, like, they all started doing it themselves in some way. So I learned the other day that Brene Brown's first book was self-published, and I'm like, really?
Oh wow,
oh my god, she's incredible. And an international speaker, she's prolifically successful and impactful, and her books are so profound. She self-published her first book. And
I did not know that.
Honestly, there's so much
mind-blowing.
Yeah, there's so much shame around, you've not got I'm like, you've got to get it out there somewhere. And I have a cake business as well, which is part of my sweet life, and that's my creative outlet. And for ages I didn't want to make videos, and I'm like, no, I can't. And then I started making them, and I loved it. I just love the whole, and we build these things up in our head, and who's going to see, what are they going to say, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, if you enjoy it and you're adding value to people, what someone throwing stones from outside of the ring says doesn't really matter. It's if you can impact one person, then you're doing something positive, and that person might be you. To feel good that you've shared.
Well, I was about to say, you're probably impacting yourself. One of the things that I've always tried to, and this is where I draw in my marketing knowledge, I always pretend that I'm telling someone else how to run their business rather than telling myself how to run mine. So even when I do my copywriting for myself, I just pretend I'm writing about this third person, Sarah Thompson. And so otherwise I feel embarrassed that I'm talking about myself like, I'm so great, look at me, I'm blah, blah, blah. And I would genuinely be stopped in my tracks if I had to write about myself. So I just pretend it's another person and I write down all the facts and then I write them into a story. And I found that to be a really great strategy whenever I'm struggling to talk about myself, and, say, this is me. And I'm always very self-deprecating, which I know is a strategy to stop someone else bringing me down.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good, to take the emotion out is so helpful. And I think a lot of when we over explain ourselves, oh well, I just did this and then this happened. And so for example, if it happens, right, you don't turn up to your social media, for example, for a few weeks or whatever, and then you feel like you need to explain yourself. I mean, you don't. It's your social media account. If you decide you want to have a day's break or whatever's not normal for you, you don't have to explain it. It's like, just jump back in with the energy that you want to share, but this need that we always need to apologize and be the good girl. And if it's relevant to your business, then maybe, if you're if
I vanished, it would definitely be strange.
Yeah. And if it's relevant and it's pertinent and you feel comfortable, but if that sometimes can be a blocker because people are worried, what are people that actually just jump in and share something valuable and unblock because getting that kind of thing perfect and being understood, there will always be people that misunderstand, and they're not your people, but the people that get it, they'll be magnetized. And I think I've come across clients before that are like, oh, you must do this system or you must do that, and we all need to find our own way within each of the opportunities that are available to us to communicate. And I think that's really important. Like, what's your voice within a space, and then practice it in front of the mirror, because it sounds silly, but just getting used to the words coming out of your mouth in a way that feels safe will make it flow so much easier in other places.
I love that. And it's really interesting what you're saying about, and I will confess, in my earlier days in my business, I definitely used to teach, this is my way and this is the way. And I'm quite mortified now, because obviously coaching lots of people and seeing such a wide range of personalities and all of these things that go into the mix when you're an entrepreneur. And I now teach things so differently in terms of, this is what we should aspire to do, and this is what we want to work towards. And I always give that kind of language, whereas before I'm like, this is what you should do, like you should post on social media once a day. And it's like, I would never give that advice now. I always say that the ultimate goal is to get towards that, but then I talk about consistency, and I'm quite embarrassed that I used to speak like that, and that's coming from corporate and giving myself guardrails on how I should tell people how to, and giving them guardrails. And obviously now I realize that that's actually not helping people, because if none of that feels good, then I'm actually holding them back. So it's been really interesting hearing you talk about that. It's so interesting. But I think I want to come back to, because you talked about women apologizing, and that is absolutely, when I train, I obviously do a lot of training, and I actually say at the beginning, I'm speaking to the women who are in this room, please do not apologize. And if you do apologize, I actually, when I'm doing face-to-face training, I give out everyone a chocolate, and I say to people, if you apologize, you have to give the chocolate back to me.
I love that.
And it's so funny, because then other people in the room become like the little hall monitors and go, oh, she apologized. And it actually brings into our consciousness how much we apologize for asking a question when you're paying to be in a training session. Like, come on. Honestly, this is your moment.
People say, I don't want to take up space. I'm like, well, that's what you're this is the intention. You paid to take up a space, so take up as much space as you want. And even when I work one-to-one with people, like, it's such a huge unlearning that we have to do. And as women, full stop, as women in different environments, and it's taken me years to unravel. And I still spot it in myself. Like when you're talking about copywriting, it makes me laugh because I used to copyright for other people and brands. And so I'll find myself automatically putting caveats in things because that's what I was trained to do. I'm like, no, this is really profound and impactful. So I'm going to talk exactly about that. I don't need to put a caveat around it, but not apologize for, you know, it's a really hard habit to unlearn, but I guess we have to model that. That's how I see it, is and be respectful of different energies in the room as well, because we all have a different. I would describe myself as an introverted extrovert, so I can be very extrovert, but I need restorative time. So I'm very conscious of making space for other voices in the room, because otherwise I can talk all day. So I think that's something.
I think that might be a marketeer's trait.
Probably. It's like, I'm a storyteller. Let's chat. But this whole idea of like, it's like, it's your business needs to take up space, otherwise how's anybody going to know about it? Like, you need to be. And I think this is why the practice is really important, to practice the storytelling and practice different lengths of telling the story about your business. This is something that I do work with people quite a lot, is, if you've got the 60-second introduction, what's that? And then if you're going to have a little chemistry session, like, what's that? And break it down, because if you try, and so many people try and cram in almost like the whole story of like how you get to, and that can be quite apologetic. Well, you know, I did this and then I did that. Oh, actually, you've got amazing skills, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And it's so easy to forget that. And it is our job to remind ourselves as entrepreneurs, because there's no one else to do it. There's no one else to say you had a you know, you did a great. Yes, there's client testimonials, but they're easily forgotten on a daily basis.
Or aren't they just? It's funny because I remember when I was early in my business, because I was so used to corporate and getting all that validation that we get in corporate, like your boss tells you you're great and you do a great job. And I said to my husband, I was about a year into my business, it's like, I want someone to tell me I'm brilliant. And he goes, people pay you. That's them telling you that you're brilliant. I was like,
it's true, yeah.
And so you definitely have to find, like you say, those structures and those voices that come through every day that remind you of what you're doing is really good, because you definitely get it. And people will tell you when you're coaching with them and stuff, but that kind of, there's a different validation when you're in an employee relationship with someone that I just don't know that you do get in self-employment. And so you do have to dig inside to find it.
You've got to create it. I was just looking, it's normally on my desk. Oh no, it is here. I've called it the love jar. I have a jar full of, I write them down and I put them in a jar so I can pull them out when I forget, of like nice things that people have said, or like a testimonial or a snippet of a testimonial or something.
I need one of those. What a gorgeous idea. So obviously you guys, I don't have a visual, but Sarah's just picked up a nice little, that's all right, it's like just a little jar, and she's got different colored Post-it notes in, and she can pull one out and it's got a few words or something that someone has said that's been, oh my gosh, I need to do that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, because I have it digitally, obviously, and obviously it gets shared on social media and stuff, but I'm a really visual person, and I think this is really important when it comes to confidence as well. It's like understanding what it is that will jolt you, remind you, whatever, because for one person they need to hear it, another person needs to read it, another person needs to be told. So what is it that really jazzes you up and keeps you going? Like, I'm a reader, I love reading stuff, and I'm quite kinesthetic, hence being like, oh, I want to pick something up and
touch it and feel it.
So I think that really helps as well. If you think about, oh, actually, do I need to hear it? Record it on a little voice, or invite your clients to create that. You know, the right clients will
accommodate
be magnetized. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Oh, look, we could talk all night, but I'm mindful that of keeping this episode not too long. But before we wrap up, Sarah, I know that you've got some amazing opportunities in which people can work with you. So would you mind sharing some of those? And for everyone, I will put in the show notes all of the links to Sarah's sweet life.
Yeah, there's 2 ways to work with me at the moment. So there is the Sweet Life Energy Reset, which is a distance healing where you can really like clear any energy blocks that are kind of if you think like feeling sluggish, feeling like not quite being able to get to where you want to, we have a little chat, connect, and then I'll clear that all for you. And then there is the Sweet Life Jumpstart as well, which is a 30-day accelerator where we get into the stories around why it is that you're not showing up how you want to, and unpick that over 30 days so that you can be in your brilliance more often.
Oh, those both sound so juicy. Look, I'm going to wrap us up on that note. Otherwise, we will keep talking, Sarah. So I just want to say thank you so much for saying yes to being a guest on my podcast. And thank you for sharing your absolute pearls of wisdom with my audience. I know that they're also going to be super grateful.
You're most welcome, my love. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode, and I look forward to catching up with you all the same time next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Social Circus. As your host, Sarah Thompson, I am thrilled that you've chosen to spend your time hanging out with me. I would be so grateful if you could spare an extra moment to go and leave me a review on your favourite podcasting platform. And if you even felt more excited, you could share my podcast with your friends who you think would get great value from it. Thanks so much again for tuning in.